Hi, and welcome to session 6, where we're going to focus on digital storytelling and how we can use it to support our English learners' writing development. So here is the hyperdoc for session 6. I'm going to walk through it quickly before we begin today's slides. You're going to start out by watching this YouTube video on the danger of a single story, because I think it really sets the tone for why digital storytelling and storytelling in general is important for our English learners and for people in general. Next, you're going to read these 4 articles on digital storytelling. There's been a lot of recent research in the area of digital storytelling and digital storytelling with English learners, so it's really an exciting time for educators in this area, because we are actually seeing a lot of research that supports this practice of using digital storytelling with our students. After you read those articles, you are going to watch this video, and you can reference the session 6 slides during the video or afterwards. After you watch the video and review the slides, what I'd like you to do is take 10 to 15 minutes, or more if you'd like, but at least 10 to 15 minutes to explore some of the technology tools that can be used to create digital stories. I can talk about them, I can show you some, but you're really not going to get a feel for them until you go in and play around or take a look at the examples. You're not going to know what you like, what fits your needs, what fits your students until you take a look at them. So what I'd like you to do is go through these tools and just play around with it. What looks nice? What looks good? What, do you see that appeals to you? I'm going to highlight a few of them in the slides, but there's so much more, and none are better than the other. Everyone has its own pluses that you might see are necessary for your setting. I did highlight these 3 articles. If you want even more ideas for ideas for apps, tools to use with digital storytelling, check these out. These also have other people weighing in on which ones they like more. So if you want to get some advice from other people who spend a lot more time in this area, kind of trying out these tools, check out some of these articles. Otherwise, 10 to 15 minutes at least looking at some of these tools right here to see which ones appeal to you, because you are going to be asked to make a digital story right here. So for the technology application product, so this week you have a technology application product and a technology application reflection. There is not a discussion, so don't look for a discussion. You just have the technology application product and reflection. So for the product, you are going to create a short digital story about an event from your life, or an experience your class shared, so maybe like a field trip or something. So you can use one of the tech tools I showed in the slides, one from this list, one from these articles, or another one that you know and like to use. As long as it's a digital story, I don't care the format it comes to me on. So choose any tool to make your digital story and create a story. So it does not have to be long, at least 3 or 4 slides. It doesn't have to be long, but just long enough where you get into whatever tool you're using and really kind of try it out and play around with it. So create a short digital story on any platform you choose. When you're done, what I'd like you to do is submit the digital story with me. So you're going to click on this link here. It will take you to a Google form. You'll type in your name, choose the term, what tool you use. So let's say you decided to use like my storybook, which is one of the ones I'll you wanted to use my storybook, and then you're going to paste your URL there. So whatever it ends up being / something. So you're going to copy and paste your URL right here, and then you're going to click, oh, click this. Here we go. Oh, I know. Well, there we go. So I did forget how Google, what it's going to ask is for the URL. Make sure you put, include the entire URL with the http://. Otherwise, it won't accept it. So there, once you've done that, your story has been submitted, and you're done with the technology application product for the week. Then you're going to do the technology application reflection, as you've been doing. If you want to think about your answers first, you can type it out in the template. Make sure you go to File and make a copy when you're doing that. But if it's easier to plan, then you can copy and paste it back into there. And then once you are done with that, you are done with the module for this session. There are, I've included some other apps here, or some other links rather, to other tools and apps for digital storytelling. So some of these are articles that I didn't include because I didn't want you reading 25 different digital storytelling articles, but I've assigned them in the past. So I've assigned this one in the past. This has a video. This is another article. So these are different articles. When you get down here, it's talking about more apps for using digital storytelling with ELs. Different articles. So if you are looking for more articles, this is your place to go. But this is just optional if you want more information about it. So, like we said earlier, here are the graded activities for this session. You're going to create a digital story and submit it to me. So here are some apps you can use. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. You may use any tool you'd like to create your digital story. And then submit it using the form as we just practiced. You have to do your technology application. Again, we just went over that. So those are the two things you have to turn in for points. As always, more information about HyperDocs. And that is session 6. So we are going to now jump into the slides. Okay, here we are, digital storytelling with English learners. So we're going to talk a lot about the background and research behind digital storytelling because I think it's really key to start with that. Sometimes we come across people who have the idea that creating stories digitally isn't as rigorous or useful to students as writing a story with a pen or pencil, writing, and making a paper book or a handbound book. But it's really key to see how digital storytelling is just as valuable for English learners. And then take a look at storytelling from the lens of an English learner about why it's so uniquely beneficial to these students. So when we are storytelling, we're telling our stories. We're taking all of our experience and thought and emotion, and we're analyzing it and compressing it and taking out the important information that we want to share about ourselves to the world. So when we have all of these different narratives coming in about people, we're hearing different things, storytelling becomes even more important, that our students are owning their story and proud of their story and they want to share it with other people. And that's really how we learn about others. So digital storytelling combines the art of telling stories with any kind of digital multimedia. So images, audio, and or video. Okay, so when I say you can choose any tool to create your digital story, it can be any digital tool that uses images, audio, or video. It revolves around a chosen theme and often contains a particular viewpoint. They're usually shorter in length, and they have a variety of uses. So we could be telling personal stories, we could be telling historical events, or even informing or instructing. So when we look at digital storytelling in the classroom, it's important to not limit it to that English language arts time. We can use digital storytelling to help students connect with concepts in math, science, social studies, the fine arts, really anything. So why storytelling? Well, it combines telling story with digital multimedia. But what's really interesting is that stories are an innate part of the human experience in any language. So storytelling is the one commonality between all world cultures, regardless of literacy rates. If you think about it, storytelling is how generations passed on history and information and lessons and values generation to generation before the written word was even created. So storytelling is innate in our brains. We know how to do it. So it makes sense that we tap into it as a way to teach students, because this is part of their brain that knows how to send and receive information through stories. Children also naturally inhabit fantasy worlds. And so stories are a natural way for them to express language and emotion, because children like stories. They always are thinking of stories and telling stories. So this is a natural way for them to share and receive information. And also stories have a structure that creates a sense of achievement and a sense of fulfillment. So there's always a beginning that sets up the scenario and a problem, a middle with some actions or events, and then a resolving end to it. So it gives us that sense of setting something up and it being fulfilled. So why might we storytell? We tell stories to gain knowledge on the structure of storytelling. So we tell stories to learn about storytelling and how that works, right? At some point, adult or a teacher told you stories to teach you about how to create your own stories. Whether or not that was the explicit reason for the story. So I know when I was young, my parents read me stories before bed. They didn't read me the stories so I would learn the story structure. They read me stories for other reasons, but by doing that, I learned story structure. They communicate messages through a non-traditional medium, right? So we might storytell or use storytelling with our students to help communicate a message in a different way. We might use digital tools to enhance their story. So we might use digital storytelling to help students tell their story in a more effective manner. We can use storytelling to build a culture of sharing and empathy. And we will storytell to understand the power of storytelling. So we'll use it to share with students how important storytelling is and the impact it has on listeners and or viewers. So the next couple slides, the next 4 slides, are going to be 4 video clips from authors talking about how they view the importance of storytelling in their life and in their career. And I might stop at some point to say a few words, but otherwise we're going to look at these 4 clips kind of one after another.
We have wonderful stories. We have, like all cultures, like all peoples, stories make the backbone of our culture. And through stories, in the early years, children learn behavior, children learn the culture through the characters in the stories. And these stories that are part of the oral tradition are very important because they have carried the culture from generation to generation, and that's how we learn to interact. We have the stories about the little half chick, el medio pollito, and this is when a parent tells you this is going to happen to you just like medio pollito, you have those points of referral. You know what your mom is telling you, and you know what's going to come if you behave just like medio pollito, or if you are conceited like la cucarachita Martina. Te pareces a la cucarachita Martina. You look just like cucarachita. You know the story. You know how they act, and you're not supposed to act like that, or because you have those points of reference. And that's what stories do. And I always tell parents, even if they don't know how to read English, the best thing they can do for their children is to tell them their stories, because that's how they're giving them the culture. You cannot hammer culture over their heads. I'm going to teach you culture. Tell them the stories, and that's how they are going to be part of your culture, the parents' culture.
When I finally realized that I had a sort of a vein of gold, if you will, that I had never tapped, it was like opening that treasure chest, that my whole Mexican heritage was something that I could write about. And so now when I talk to teachers and when I talk to librarians and when I talk to students, I say, the trick is how we bring everything that we are to the page, everything. So that if a student happens to I have a son who loves science and who loved bugs, and I always say to him, that was always something you could write about because you were excited about it. Well, culture is the same way. And when I'm using my books with students particularly with students who are bilingual, who are bicultural, they make connections immediately. They're so excited because they see themselves. I had a woman come up to me the other night at a poetry reading at a university in Colorado. And she rushed in and she had this present for me. And she said, I want to give you this present. She said, because I want you to meet this little boy. And it was her son. And she said, he never cared about books. He was just a little tot. She said, until I read him Tomas and the Library Lady. And it had his name, Enrique, in it. And she said, and he has carried this book around ever since. Well, that was a very moving moment, We know that students read when they make connections. They need to make connections. And so including all of the rich cultures of the United States, that's another way that we help students to make connections with books.
Just like we know that students who are connected with what they're reading are better readers, students who connect with what they're writing will develop writing much quicker and much more effectively. So allowing students to tap into their language and culture when they're making digital stories is going to help them make those connections and become better writers.
I think every writer's influenced by the manner of their birth, the path their life takes, the people they're exposed to. For me, I'm dyslexic. I'm an autodyslexic. I hear phonemes unclearly. Sometimes they're like the visual equivalent of HD, and sometimes they're like the old Zenith television. So I read lips a lot. English is my second language. I am not the kid you would have pegged as a writer, ever. And rightly so. Why words? In part because I loved sounds. I loved stories. I grew up with Cuban storytellers and Southern storytellers. It was a double whammy. How do you tell stories? You listen.
Storytelling in Trinidad and Tobago is serious business. And when I say serious business, I mean people actually get paid. So every year there's Carnival. And at Carnival, Calypsonians are there to make their money. It's between Christmas and whenever Carnival lands, because it's different every year because of it ends at the beginning of Lent. And they make a whole new album every year that they are coming out with and singing, and all of the songs really are stories, and they're often political or they're often cultural commentary. That is what traditional calypso is about. And listening to calypso growing up, you're listening to all of these stories all of the time. And this is how people are making their money. And also, there are people on the street, like buskers, who are just, you could park someplace. We used to do this drive to an overlook in Port of Spain. And you just drive up and look out over the whole expanse of Port of Spain below you. And there would be these guys who were calypsonians sort of for hire. And they would come to you and you would pay them a few bucks. And they would ask you a couple of questions about yourself, your name, your favorite color, how you're doing in school, what do you like, sports-wise, or whatever it was. And they make up a calypso on the spot. And so this was my introduction to storytelling, was listening to calypso every year. And because everybody had this expansive album every year, and there are many, many calypsonians, it's a lot of work. They're producing a lot of work every single year to see which are the songs that are going to take and which are the stories that are going to take and which are the stories everybody's going to be interested in. So that really was my introduction to storytelling.
Now that we've looked at why we storytell and why we might use storytelling in the classroom, let's look at what effect storytelling has on the brain. Stories activate parts of our brain in a way in which the listener internalizes that story and turns it into their own ideas and experience. So when you hear a story, you process it by turning it into your own ideas, and it becomes part of your experience. And what's key about that is when people believe an idea is theirs, or they feel an idea is theirs, they put more energy behind implementing it, reinforcing the culture and values, and facilitating learning and change. So if students believe and internalize a story as part of their experience, they're going to have more energy and put more energy behind learning about it and using it to kind of change their thinking. Students recall information tied to storytelling much better than material presented without storytelling. And this is where some of that exciting research is coming in, is that we're seeing students, when told information through a story, understand it a lot better than if they're told information not through a story. And that's really, really important information. I always think of the example of, how many people do you think knew the story of Alexander Hamilton before the musical Hamilton? Very few. So when Lin-Manuel Miranda turned Hamilton into a musical and into a story, then people were easily able to remember the story of Alexander Hamilton. And stories capture our attention better than other information because they leave physical and emotional traces in the brain and paths in the brain that we can then access again at a later date. So let's take a look at why digital storytelling is so key for ELs.
Is this thing on?
I'm right here. I can hear you.
What about now?
Loud and clear.
That's what I'm saying we need to do for our English language learners.
Are you actually suggesting that we give megaphones to children?
Not real megaphones, but apps and tech tools can really amplify your ELL's voices in your classroom and beyond.
Oh, that seems great, but how would you actually do that?
First up, focus learning on what ELLs have, not what they lack. Use digital tools to help them show what they already know.
You mean like Google Translate?
Sure, but we've got to push beyond translation.
What about pictures, visuals, or other multimedia?
Why not have students create their own online content as a way to communicate?
You mean like one of those easy-to-use digital creation or storytelling apps?
Exactly. We can even encourage students to bring their own stories and culture into what they're learning.
That really builds on kids' strengths. But shouldn't we encourage more social interaction?
Think of it this way. Use technology as a scaffold or bridge toward more in-person communication.
So apps or websites are only one part of the puzzle.
Yeah, it's great if kids can hear and even see themselves before they share or present their work.
Right. Give them lots of chances to record, listen back, and re-record. I bet there are a lot of different apps that do this.
Yup, and whether they're working alone or in groups, kids can get lots of practice using language and get feedback in a lower stakes setting.
This is great, but shouldn't kids work towards a finished product or a final presentation?
Totally, and be sure to give ELLs an authentic audience for their work.
So using digital tools to help kids share their work beyond the classroom, right?
It could be. Have kids include peers, family members, and maybe even others. As teachers, we shouldn't be the only audience for students' work.
You know, kids could even translate and share their work in their home language.
Right. They can expand their audience and also build their academic language skills bilingually. So there we have it. 3 ways digital tools can amplify ELLs' voices in their learning. Focus on what ELLs bring, not what they lack. Use digital tools to scaffold in-person language learning, and give your ELLs an authentic audience for their work.
You know, I think I've got this.
You sure about that?
Looking for more great resources? Head over to Common Sense Education for teaching strategies, EdTech reviews, lesson plans, and more.
So that sums up really, or gives an introduction to why storytelling is so beneficial for our language learners. You know, we know that speaking English in front of others can cause tremendous anxiety. And when that affective filter is up because of anxiety or other negative emotions, it interferes with students' ability to acquire language. And even with the most well-planned, immersive, real-world learning opportunities, students who have high anxiety, their brains aren't receptive to learning. So you could spend hours and millions of dollars on the best experience for English learners, but if they're anxious, it will not help them. And so digital storytelling is an effective way for language learners to practice English without the stress of being, you know, in front of someone or on stage or having to be vulnerable and make mistakes in front of people. And with digital storytelling tools, students can spend time really formulating and crafting their stories, reflecting and assessing, and collaborating with others so that they really feel confident in their abilities and confident in what they produce. And digital storytelling really helps English learners share their experience, right? So this is a way for them to share what maybe their story about being an immigrant, maybe their story about learning a new language, maybe their story about just being multilingual, multicultural, and having identities in both worlds. It can be a mode of expression for students who might struggle with writing traditional text. And it really helps students develop their unique voice as a person and as an author that will transfer into kind of all areas of their English development, but especially writing. It allows for differentiation, right? Depending on what kind of digital tool you use, it really gives students at every point of English language proficiency an entry point to participate. So even if they just told a story with images or videos or a mixture of that, because they haven't really developed, they're newer to the language and don't have those speaking skills yet, it's still giving them access to participate. And it allows for revision for an authentic reason. So I know when I was learning to write a long, long time ago in elementary school, we had a really strict writing process. We did a rough draft, we revised, did a second draft, revised, did a third draft, revised, however many the teacher arbitrarily thought of that day. So let's say even if you did 2 revisions, sometimes after the first revision, I felt like, I made all the corrections and I didn't really have any corrections for the teacher, but because it was our strict thing and we had to keep everybody on the same schedule, I still had to write a second revision or do a second revision. And even though it really didn't need it, right? I didn't want it. So it gives revision for an authentic reason. When you revise a digital story, it's because it's your story, it's part of you, and you want to make it better because you want to put the best product out to others. But sometimes when we aren't attached to a writing prompt or a writing assignment, we don't feel that need to revise because we don't care about it. So when we're telling digital stories, we tend to have more investment in them, so we want to revise them, so it makes that revision more authentic. Digital storytelling gives us the opportunity to bring in family members or peers or mentors to collaborate. And then finally, we're able to publish for the whole world to see. So the students know that they're writing for an authentic audience, and so they have an authentic purpose for writing. Okay, so like I said, you will be creating your own digital story for the technology application product. We're going to take a look at examples of students in past courses, what they have turned in and submitted. By no means do yours need to look like this. I've done this with, so many students, and every single story I've gotten is different and has a different purpose. So I'm not trying to show you exactly what I want, because there isn't anything I specifically want. I want your story, so that's going to be whatever you want. What I can say is that in the past, students have used this as an opportunity to either create a story that they want to share with their students and use in instruction, or they've created it as a model, as an example to show their students as like the beginning of a digital story product or storytelling project. So they've created a model storybook so that their students have some guidance about what theirs should look like. So, and some teachers have just done the assignment and shared a story with me and not really known how or if they were going to use it. So really, any purpose is accepted, and any tool is accepted. So let's take a look at some of these. So the first one is in Story Jumper. Story Jumper is a tool that, a website rather, to create digital stories. And this was somebody's finished story on Story Jumper. So she taught pre-K, and this was an opportunity to create a digital story that she could share as a whole group to teachers, students, or reinforce to students the concept about making the right choice. So we can see she has created her story. So she has brought in a background and some clip art, and I'm going to show you some videos and next that are tutorials that show you how to do this. But you can see here's her story that she might share with students. Okay, so I just skipped to the end there. So you can see this was her example in Story Jumper. Next, I'm going to show you an LEA example. So this teacher used Little Bird Tales to create a language experience approach. So she was planning on doing a language experience approach activity with her students. So they were going to go on a field trip and then come back and do an LEA. So she was going to model it before they went on the field trip. So she shared, she's telling a digital story from a trip she took, and then they were going to do a practice LEA before their actual field trip, so the students knew. Now, what's interesting about Little Bird Tales is that it lets you record audio for each picture. So she tells the story. So then if you go to the next page, you can see she's uploaded pictures, her own pictures, and she puts the text for the story here and then records her voice as she tells her students the story. Okay, let's look. So the next example is also from Little Bird Tales, and this was a high school teacher, and he created a digital story to introduce his students to a book they were going to be reading, and I'll see if you can look at or figure out the book. So this is A Tale of Three Children. So this is their school in Macomb. It's similar to yours. Let's see if you know the three children that attend. Any guesses yet? You probably have a better idea now. So this is Scout. So the story is To Kill a Mockingbird, but he hasn't introduced that yet. But what he's going to do is go through and introduce the characters and give you some background about them, so you feel like you really know them, and you have this background. So when you start to read To Kill a Mockingbird, you are more invested and it's more comprehensible because you have this background information. So you can see, and you can go through these stories on your own with these links. Here's an example for my storybook, and this is a newer tool, and I didn't have any examples from a newer tool for me to use with this class, so I didn't have any examples. But you can see this is an example storybook and kind of what the end products look like on my storybook and what you can do. So that's an example for my storybook. And then this is an article from Free Tech for Teachers about using my storybook with students to create digital stories. And finally, here are some tutorial videos, and there's also some links in here. So the first few are tutorials about just the ins and outs of using the different tools that I showed you examples from. So here's Story Jumper, here's Little Bird Tales, here's Storybird, and my storybook. Now, I didn't create these. I picked the ones that I liked from YouTube that were helpful for me in learning to use these tools and have been helpful for other students in the past. And a lot of times I tend to choose videos that teachers have created for their students because I think they're just clearer language and more to the point. So I tend to choose those. The last couple links are about using Google Slides. So I'm using Google Slides right now to share this. So how can we use Google Slides to create digital stories? So here's some different ideas about that if you'd prefer to work in Google Slides. I've been reading some more, I've been reading a lot about different strategies and about using Google Slides with digital storytelling, so I wanted to share them with you, even though I haven't created any stories in Google Slides yet. But here's someone who used the autoplay feature of Google Slides to automatically, so that Google Slides automatically does audio and has the story be, so you can record yourself reading each page and that will automatically play when you advance the slide. And then the last few are different takes on creating choose your own adventure digital stories. So how Google Slides works is that if we create a link, we can jump back to any slide. So I can show you if I wanted to say, give someone an option. So, so I could always say, go back to the first video. And if I wanted to make a link that went back to the first video, I can go up here to insert link, click on slides in this presentation, and go to the first video slide, which I know is 6. And then if we click this, it takes us back to the slide. So using this feature, we could create a choose your own adventure. So you can have an image, have some text, and say, okay, what do you want to do? One link says, skip school and go to the arcade, and the other one says, stay in school and study math. And you have to pick which one, the student has to pick which one, or the reader rather has to pick which one they want to do, and then based on that, it takes them down a different path. So these are different examples or different articles that kind of highlight different uses for that. And then this is someone who has created a choose your own adventure template. So you don't even have to figure out how the idea tree of paths would go. You can kind of make your own path. So you can go to File, make a copy of the entire presentation, and then that will go into your own copy, will go into your own drive, and you can edit it as you see fit. So those are some resources to help you on your digital story. Remember, after you're done with your digital story, to submit the URL using the link that we practiced earlier. And if you have any questions about your digital story, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in session 7.